She heard voices. She carried a sword. She changed the course of history. But what if Joan of Arc's power did not just come from visions? What if it came from ancient personas within her? The gladiator, the oracle knight, the Heartfire, and the shadows that sought to silence her. This isn't just a story of war and faith. This is a soul's battle between divine clarity and the darkness that feared it. Hit that like, subscribe, and let's uncover the truth behind the girl who defied empires. Now, Joan of Arc doesn't begin her journey with power or position. She begins it with faith. A teenage girl in a world ruled by men, monarchs, and warlords. Yet she hears insights, and these aren't whispers of madness, they're divine assignments. This is the embodiment of the Oracle Knight, not a warrior forged in battle, but a protector summoned by destiny. She's brave, but not because she feels no fear, but because she really listens anyway. But she really rides not for glory, but for the innocent, for the broken, for the people no one else will fight for. But this calling doesn't burn cold. It ignites something powerful within her, which is the Heartfire, a blazing emotional core fueled by conviction, love, and deep spiritual rage against injustice. Her empathy is her strength, and her vulnerability. For those who carry the Heartfire burn brightly, but often they burn alone. And behind that fire is the nomad, the part of her that will never be caged. Joan leaves her home, her family, her girlhood, not to escape, but to answer something larger than herself. She moves from the battlefield to court to prison, never rooted, always following the voice of purpose. So really those shadows that are looming over her, but even the purest of fire really casts a shadow. So the hollow flame really waits at the edge, ready to consume her with exhaustion, to her burnout, because really those with great hearts often give until there's nothing left. And then the wanderer stalks her every steps. So really threatening to scatter her sense of grounding with each new city, each changing ally, each false promise of safety. Is she led by God, or is she led by simply drifting? And in rare moments, as command and power begin to gather around her, the overlord whispers they don't know what they're doing. You only can see the truth if you tighten your grasp. Don't trust them. Lead alone. This is the danger for those called to protect. In trying to save the world, they really forget to ask for help. The Oracle Knight is not born from certainty. So she was really born from surrender, a willingness to say yes to the call, even when no one else hears it. Now, even when the cost is everything. Joan's purity of purpose made her powerful, which is exactly what the Oracle Knight is all about. But it also made her dangerous to rulers, to systems, to anyone who profited from the silence, from the compliance, or from the fear, because that's what she was combating. And that is why they burned her. But Joan of Arc really no longer walks as a girl with visions. She rides as a commander of armies, a voice of prophecy, a force kings can no longer ignore. At just age 17, she really defies every social and spiritual order of her time. She convinces Charles VII, a prince in exile, to give her a sword, a banner, and the authority to march at the head of an army. Not because she's noble, not because she's royal, but because her presence is undeniable. This is where she had the rise of the wayfinder, a persona who sees the possibility where others see only chaos. Joan doesn't just lead. She charts divine paths through the impossible. She also carries the sage, which is wisdom not born from age, but from insight. She knows things that maybe she should not know. She speaks with clarity that unsettles scholars and clergy alike. That is the sage. She is both fire and compass. And then, in her boldest moments, standing beside kings, rallying armies, lifting a nation from despair, she touches the rare air of the ascendant sovereign. Leadership rooted not in ego, but in full alignment. A sovereign soul guided by something greater than just a crown. But victory can become intoxicating, and even the most divinely led path must pass through the valley of the shadow. And that is the overlord whispering in her ear to growing that influence. You must control it all. They won't protect your vision. Tighten your grasp. Trust no one. This is the shadow of really that oracle knight who really believes that she's alone and must guard the prophecy until really becomes that control disguised in conviction. The striver now claws at her heart. They don't believe in you. Prove yourself again and again and again, because even when you've done the impossible, the whole world still demands more. And those with a sacred purpose often feel like they're never enough. And then the bastion rises. The once loyal guardian, as the gladiator, turned to stone. To protect the mission, Joan begins to close off, and her compassion becomes armor. Her fire becomes iron, and she begins to trust purpose more than people. Now, every step Joan takes towards power is a step away from true safety. With each victory, she ascends closer to sainthood, but also closer to the edge of betrayal, fear, and misunderstanding. Because the higher you climb without grounding, the more dangerous the wind becomes. And when you are seen as divine, people forget you're still human. Joan didn't seek a crown, but she wore one in spirit. And that made her more powerful and more threatening than any monarch alive. Joan of Arc, once the flame of France's resurrection, now stands cold and alone, captured and chained, and paraded before a court that seeks not truth, but confirmation of its own fear. She enters her trial not as a child, nor merely as a soldier. She walks in as the oracle of truth, a figure whose presence reflects not just divinity, but accountability. She says what others dare not. She answers with clarity, not calculation. She holds her line with terrifying stillness, even as threats close in from all sides. In this moment, she channels lucidity, the rare clarity that strips away performance and reveals the true nature of things. And in her calm, unwavering presence, she still becomes still wind in the eye of the storm around her, the peace in the center of their fear. But her shadows were not her own. This act is not a descent into Joan's personal darkness. It is a trial by the shadows of others. Across the courtroom, cloaked in theology and power, sits the shade, the manipulative whisperer, cloaking really in that political ambition in the language of religious law. They twist Joan's words, not to understand her, but to trap her. The void caster presides in this cold intellect without any soul. Judgment without mercy, law without humanity. They do not seek divine alignment. They only precedent and punishment. And behind them all, hidden in the holy robes and sovereign titles, really rules the Tyrant Regent, a leader gripped by fear of losing power by a young lady. He cannot crown himself while she still lives, for her truth outshines his throne. Then there is the siren, not in Joan, but in how they paint her. They call her seductive, a witch, a liar, a heretic. They weaponize femininity, not to understand it, but to discredit it. And so, Joan is not judged for her crimes. She is judged for her clarity, for being the mirror no one wanted to look into. She was never just a trial of a peasant girl with visions. It was a trial of truth itself. Joan's downfall did not come from her own descent into the shadows. It came from the shadows projected onto her, from a world that could not reconcile a woman, a poor young woman who stood really boldly in her truth and refused to bow. In that final act, she became not the flame that burned, but the torch they tried to extinguish. But even in the smoke and the ash, the light of the oracle still shines. And Joan of Arc was not merely a saint or a martyr. She was a blend of the Oracle Knight, the Heartfire, and the Ascendant Sovereign. Tested by every shadow on her path, her life teaches us you can walk with truth and still be burned by those in the dark. But even in death, her flame never went out, because when someone embodies their purpose so purely, not even fire can silence them. If this episode hit a chord with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone that would enjoy this particular episode about Joan of Arc. How interesting the times are very similar to historic to now.